Richard Maserati Rick Carter. Richard Maserati Rick Carter was Detroit royalty, one of the flashiest, boldest, and most feared drug figures the city ever produced. By the time he hit 29, he and his partner Demetrius Holloway had built a cocaine empire, pulling in around $20 million a year, right at the height of the crack epidemic. The streets gave him his nickname after he pulled up to a Detroit club in a brand new Maserati convertible, a move that instantly cemented his legend.
Maserati Rick, who ran a multi-million-dollar crack cocaine and heroin empire on Detroit's east side for driving flashy cars, wearing the finest clothes, and the most expensive jewelry.
But with money and flash came enemies, and by 1998, police said he had enough rivals to fill Tiger Stadium. One of the most dangerous was Edward Big Ed Hansard, a man whose feud with Carter supposedly began over a debt at Hansard's hair salon and exploded into a violent street war. Rick had already tried to take Hansard out several times, but on September 10, 1998, the tables turned. Hansard and his enforcer, Lodrick Ricky the Hitman Parker, confronted Carter outside his car wash business. A shootout erupted and Carter was hit in the stomach. He was rushed to Mount Carmel Mercy Hospital, where police quickly learned that even a hospital bed didn't make him feel safe. Inside his room, officers found a loaded 9mm semi-automatic pistol tucked in a nightstand beside a wooden cross and rosary beads. But war was exactly what greeted him. 2 days later, on September 12, 1988, Detroit witnessed something it had never seen: a major street figure executed inside a hospital. The killer walked through the building disguised in doctor scrubs, breezed past security, and went straight to room 307. One precise shot to Carter's head ended the feud permanently.
He was recovering here in room 307 after having been shot by a drug rival. And then they came back on September 12, 1988 to finish off the job.
Carter's funeral matched the life he lived. He was laid to rest in a custom silver casket shaped like a Mercedes-Benz that reportedly cost up to $25,000. And although Parker was charged with a hospital killing, he beat the case and walked free, leaving one of Detroit's most legendary stories forever stamped in mystery, money, and murder. Lester Jim Brown Coke. He was the ruler of Tivoli Gardens and the feared founder of the Shower Posse, a crew in the U.S. linked to more than 1,600 murders. Their name came from their signature tactic, attacking enemies by showering them with bullets. Jim Brown didn't just control the neighborhood, he controlled loyalty, politics, and fear. His ties to Jamaica's political elite, especially the Jamaica Labour Party or JLP, gave him a level of protection most gang leaders could only dream of.
Jim Brown came to Miami in 1984 to see what was going on with his Shower Posse and their drug dealing activity. In November that year, he walked into a house and executed 5 people. He walked around each one of them and shot them in the head with a .45. Jim Brown is a bad, bad man.
But by 1990, the United States was done watching from afar. Federal prosecutors indicted Coke on serious charges: drug trafficking, murder, and conspiracy. He was arrested and placed in the high-security General Penitentiary in Kingston, where he waited for extradition to America. And for a man like Jim Brown, facing U.S. justice meant losing everything: his power, his influence, his control. It was a future he wanted no part of.
When he was arrested at the request of the Americans, he faced charges of murder, drug trafficking, extortion. He lost the fight, but he never stood trial in an American court. It was said that too many powerful people would have been implicated if he had.
Then tragedy struck his family. Just days before Jim Brown's own death, his eldest son and chosen heir, Mark Jati Coke, was gunned down while riding his motorcycle. The streets erupted immediately. Police said 12 people were killed in a violent chain reaction that followed, a brutal reminder of what the Shower Posse was capable of when provoked. On Sunday, February 23, 1992, the same afternoon Jati was being buried, Jim Brown met his own mysterious end. A fire broke out inside a cell block, trapping him inside. He died from smoke and soot inhalation, suffocating and burning within the walls that were supposed to hold him safely until extradition. The shock wasn't in the fact that he died violently, but where and how it happened. The fire's cause was never identified. Instantly, whispers spread. Had he been silenced to protect Jamaica's political figures? Was it a setup to keep him from talking to American authorities? Or was it revenge from within the prison system? The truth never surfaced. Jim Brown's death sealed the secrets of the Shower Posse. Nothing more was revealed about the gang's inner politics, their political connections, or the crimes tied to his leadership. Instead, the torch passed to his adopted son, Christopher Doo-Doo's Coke, who carried the empire forward for nearly 20 more years, shaping Jamaica's underworld long after Jim Brown's ashes cooled. Willie "Flukey" Stokes. He was Chicago's definition of flashy power. Known everywhere as Super Dude, he was the most extravagant drug dealer on the South Side. He lived his life like a billboard for success. 3 Cadillacs, each with fluky vanity plates, designer clothes, and constant displays of wealth. His heroin and cocaine empire was massive, bringing in about $100,000 every week. One stash alone, 22 kilograms of heroin, was worth more than $60 million. In Chicago's underworld, Flukey was a legend.
Confidential federal drug enforcement documents obtained by Unit 5 reveal how big Flukey's organization was. Flukey was trying to hire hitman James Allen as an enforcer to protect his drug organization. Flukey showed him 22 kilos of heroin worth more than $60 million. That was at just one stash house.
And he loved theatrics. 2 years before his own death, his son Willie the Wimp Stokes Jr. was murdered. Flukey gave him a funeral that still gets talked about today, a Cadillac Seville-shaped coffin with working headlights. He even placed $100 bills between his son's diamond-covered fingers. But power doesn't make you untouchable. It only makes the target on your back brighter. On November 19, 1986, just after midnight, Flukey made a fatal mistake. He wasn't at home with his wife. He was dropping off his mistress, Diane Miller, at her place on the South Side. Before arriving, he called ahead and asked someone to turn on the outdoor floodlights. As his custom Cadillac limousine rolled up, 2 gunmen stepped out of the darkness and opened fire. Shotguns and automatic rifles ripped through the quiet street. Flukey was hit in the mouth and chest at close range. His chauffeur, Ronald Johnson, was also killed instantly. But the real twist came later. The one person meant to protect him, his bodyguard, Earl Wilson, was the mastermind behind the murder. Wilson, who claimed he chased the attackers and fired back, was later convicted of arranging the hit. Even in death, Flukey kept a bit of his trademark style. He was buried wearing tinted glasses and holding a cell phone, as if he were still taking calls and making deals. Demetrius "Big Meech" of the 80s, Holloway. He was known on the streets as the original Big Meech long before BMF came around. In the late 80s, Demetrius Holloway wasn't just another Detroit hustler. He was the city's cocaine king. Born in the rough Brewster Douglas projects, he climbed up fast, building a massive, well-organized drug empire that used the I-75 corridor to funnel cocaine from Miami straight into Detroit. By the time he peaked, people said Holloway controlled roughly 4/5, about 80% of all cocaine flowing through Detroit, and unlike the loud, flashy kingpins of the era, Holloway had a different image. He preferred Italian suits, clean lines, and a businessman's swagger.
Demetrius Holloway, had he wanted to be, could have been a CEO of a major corporation. He never drank, he never smoked, he laughed at people who used drugs, and he was a leader. See, a lot of these guys they lead in the wrong way and they lead in the wrong business.
But big power always comes with big paranoia. 2 years earlier, his closest associate, Richard Maserati Rick Carter, had been murdered inside a hospital in one of the boldest hits Detroit had ever seen. Holloway knew that kind of ending was waiting for him too. He had already faked his own kidnapping once just to dodge people trying to kill him. His organization was neck-deep in several street wars, and the feds were closing in with a serious racketeering case that could wipe out everything he built. Then it got worse. Just weeks before his own death, Holloway's older brother and sister-in-law were murdered, hitting him deeply on a personal level. Everyone around him knew the pressure was suffocating. But despite all the danger, despite knowing he was a walking target, Holloway couldn't give up his habits. He moved like he was untouchable. That stubborn confidence cost him. On October 8, 1990, Holloway stepped out of a safe environment and went to the Broadway, an upscale men's clothing store in downtown Detroit. Crazy enough, the place was just a couple blocks from police headquarters, right in the shadow of law enforcement. He was alone, armed, and carrying somewhere between $14,000 and $17,000 in cash. He walked up to the counter to buy a pair of Ralph Lauren socks, and that's when Lester Milton, a small-time player tied to rival crews, walked right in. Milton approached him from behind and fired a single shot to the back of Holloway's head. Holloway dropped instantly. His gun never even left his pocket. Milton snapped his fingers, said, "Got him," and strolled out whistling like he had just finished an errand.
Police tonight refused to release the identity of the man found shot at the Broadway clothing store. Friends and relatives of Demetrius Holloway gathered quickly after word of the shooting spread through the city.
The hit was widely believed to be ordered by major rivals, possibly including Wayman World Benji Kincaid. The boldest of the murder, done in broad daylight, footsteps from the police, cemented Holloway's legend. His death became the blueprint for future kingpins, including the founder of BMF, who eventually carried the Big Meech name. Stanley "Tookie" Williams. He was a giant in every sense. In 1971, he co-founded the Crips alongside Raymond Washington, helping create what would eventually become one of the most infamous street gangs in America. Tookie himself was huge, muscular, and intimidating, leading the West Side Crips with a reputation for raw violence. But in 1979, after years of street battles and a deep addiction to PCP, his life spiraled into darkness. That year, Williams was arrested and charged with the execution-style murders of 4 people during 2 separate robberies: convenience store clerk Albert Owens and 3 members of a family who owned a motel. He was convicted and sentenced to death in 1981, landing on death row in San Quentin State Prison. For the next 20 years, Tookie became one of the most complicated figures in American criminal history. On one hand, he spent long stretches in solitary confinement for attacking guards and inmates. On the other hand, he claimed to have gone through a deep personal transformation. Tookie renounced gang life, wrote children's books warning kids about the dangers of the street, and even received nominations for the Nobel Peace Prize and the Nobel Prize in Literature. Major celebrities, from activists to Hollywood names, publicly fought for him to receive clemency.
Working together, we can put an end to this cycle that creates deep pain in the hearts of our mothers, our fathers, and our people who have lost loved ones to this senseless violence.
But one thing worked against him. Williams refused to admit guilt. He maintained until the very end that he didn't commit the murders. And for Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, that refusal was a deal breaker. On December 12, 2005, Schwarzenegger denied clemency, citing transcripts where Williams had allegedly laughed about the killings. As midnight passed on December 13th, Tookie was led to the execution chamber. What happened next was unusually long and painful. Because of his massive muscular build, the execution team struggled to find suitable veins for the IV lines. The lethal injection procedure dragged on for about 36 minutes, far longer than usual. An unseen medical staff repeatedly tried to establish a proper connection. Tookie never gave formal last words, but he did make one last gesture. Before the lethal drugs fully took hold, he lifted his head and stared directly at his 5 witnesses. Soon after, the first drug, sodium pentothal, pulled him under. The next chemicals shut down his lungs and heart. At 12:35, Stanley "Tookie" Williams was pronounced dead, becoming the 12th person executed by California since the state reinstated the death penalty. Juan Raul Garza. He lived a life built on contradictions. To people in his South Texas community, he was a respectable man, a successful construction company owner, a devoted father of 4, and the well-mannered son-in-law of a respected local pastor. Behind closed doors, though, Garza was running one of the biggest marijuana trafficking operations in the region. His organization moved thousands of kilos from Oaxaca, Mexico, across the border and into U.S. cities. He presented himself as a businessman, but he controlled his empire through fear, violence, and absolute paranoia.
The fancy clothes, the cowboy boots, the black jeans, the gold chains. He was at the top of the chain in his world.
He would fly deep into Mexico to bring back multi-100-kilo loads of marijuana.
When federal agents seized several major shipments, Garza became convinced that someone inside the organization was talking. To enforce loyalty, he turned to murder. He ordered the killings of Gilberto Matos and Erasmo de la Fuente, 2 men he suspected of cooperating. But it was the killing of Thomas Rumbo that showed the full extent of Garza's brutality. Rumbo had agreed to work with federal investigators. To deal with him, Garza didn't send someone else. He handled it personally. On January 10, 1999, Rumbo was lured out and Garza shot him multiple times in the head and neck, making sure the message was loud and clear. Betrayal meant death. His paranoia kept growing. He ordered additional hits, including the killing of Diana Flores Villarreal simply because he believed she was laughing at him. The violence combined with the drug trafficking made him a top federal target. Garza's downfall came in 1992 when he was arrested in Mexico after making a phone call to an associate who had already flipped. He was extradited to the United States to face federal charges. Prosecutors revealed that Garza had tried to bribe guards for an escape and had even ordered the kidnapping and torture of the lead prosecutor. There was no question he was facing the highest penalty possible.
You can give me one more chance here. I'll be very grateful and I won't let you down.
In 1993, Garza became the first person sentenced to death under the 1988 Anti-Drug Abuse Act, also known as the Drug Kingpin Act. His case marked a major moment in the U.S. government's war on drugs. They were willing to use the death penalty on traffickers who used murder as a tool of their business. On June 19, 2001, Garza was executed by lethal injection at the federal prison in Terre Haute, Indiana, just 8 days after Timothy McVeigh's execution at the same facility. Garza's lawyers argued that racial bias played a role in federal death penalty cases, but the execution moved forward. In his final words, Garza apologized. Moments later, a witness said he let out a quiet sigh, like he finally accepted that it was all over. Raymond Washington. Raymond Washington was born in 1953 in South Central Los Angeles during a time when the community was still recovering from riots, poverty, and a lack of real opportunities. He grew up in an environment where young men had very few paths forward, and many of those paths pulled them toward survival by any means necessary. In the late 1960s, Washington began gathering a group of boys around him, a crew that would eventually become the Crips. At first, the movement didn't look like anything like the violent, fractured organization people know today. Washington admired the discipline and community stance of groups like the Black Panther Party, and the early idea behind the Crips was rooted in wanting control, unity, and protection within their neighborhoods. Raymond himself was known for being tough in a very physical way. People described him as a hog because he fought hard, often, and without hesitation. He was a street figure who believed in handling problems with his hands, not guns. In 1971, he made a move that changed Los Angeles gang culture permanently. He joined forces with Stanley "Tookie" Williams, uniting Washington's East Side Crips with Tookie's West Side power base. That partnership officially set the Crips on the path to becoming one of the most influential and feared street gangs in the country.
How did Cripping start, based on your experience?
But everything shifted in 1974. Washington was convicted of second-degree robbery and sentenced to 5 years in prison. His absence shook the structure he had helped build. The Crips were a young, fast-growing organization, and without Washington's leadership, different cliques began acting independently. When he was paroled in 1976, he came home to a completely different world. The fistfights he believed in had been replaced by gun battles and street executions. The unity he once pushed had splintered into dozens of separate sets, many of which were fighting each other as fiercely as they fought rivals like the Bloods. People close to him said Washington was disturbed by what he saw. He no longer had real control over the Crips, and he reportedly wanted to pull back, rebuild unity, and maybe even work toward a truce with the Bloods. He seemed to realize the monster he originally created was growing into something he no longer wanted to be part of. But fate didn't give him time to act. On the night of August 9, 1979, just 5 days before his 26th birthday, Washington was standing near East 64th Street and South San Pedro Street. A car rolled up and someone inside called his name. People who knew him insisted he never walk toward a car full of strangers, which means he recognized the voice. As he stepped forward, the passenger pulled out a sawed-off shotgun and fired. The blast hit Washington in the abdomen, leaving massive internal injuries. He was rushed to Morningside Hospital, but he died during emergency surgery. The streets compared it to a presidential assassination, and his death sent immediate shockwaves through South Central. With no remaining central figure, Crip-on-Crip violence exploded, bringing the gang into deeply divided factions. Many people argue that Washington's death marked the true beginning of the long, bloody decades of Los Angeles gang wars that followed. Sam "Scully" Clay. He was the kind of man who dominated a city without ever needing to say much. During the height of the crack era in New Orleans, he rose to become the king of the Calio projects, running one of the most powerful operations the city had ever seen. Even his nickname had a dark edge. People said Scully came from the skull and crossbones symbol found on poison labels, a warning sign that what he sold was deadly, and crossing him could even be deadlier. Scully didn't run a sloppy street crew. His setup was organized like a small military. He opened several crack powder shops across New Orleans, each controlled by loyal lieutenants who made sure the product moved smoothly and the money flowed back up. One of the most interesting things about Scully was his security strategy. Knowing assassins could be anywhere, he operated in constant motion. He kept multiple, expensive, futuristic cars hidden around the city. He would drive into the Calio in one vehicle, ditch it on foot through the maze-like project cuts, and climb into a different unmarked car waiting on the other side. By the time anyone tried to track him, he was already gone.
He had a 78 98. It was gold with gangster white walls on it.
But Scully wasn't just feared. He was deeply loved by the people of his community. He was generous in a way that felt almost shocking for someone running a drug empire. He bought school supplies for kids, paid rent for families in trouble, and constantly encouraged young people to do better with their lives. He often told them, "Become something, make something of yourselves, and don't be like me." He gave money away so casually that he would send someone to the store with a $100 bill for a single soda, then tell them to keep the change. To many people, he felt more like a local protector than a criminal. Still, that kindness had a limit. With rivals, Scully was unforgiving. He initially shared the Calio projects with another major dealer, Glenn Metz. They split the territory. Scully controlled the front, Metz controlled the back, but Metz wanted it all. Tension turned into open conflict, and the war in the Calio housing project began. On June 11, 1987, around 4 in the morning, Scully's life came to a violent end. He was shot to death in a hallway inside the Calio projects. The murder was never officially solved, but suspicion immediately pointed toward Gerald Meatball Arthur, a brutal enforcer connected to Glenn Metz. With Scully gone, the balance of power in New Orleans was destroyed. His death triggered a long and chaotic power struggle. New Orleans plunged into an extended era of drug wars, retaliation, and instability that lasted for more than 2 decades.